My name is Tony Rivero. I'm the Vice Mayor in the City of Peoria. And I'm also the President of United Peoria Foundation, who is organizing this event. Before I start, I would like to recognize our elected officials who are present here today, starting with Councilmember Ron Ames from the City of Peoria. Also in attendance, Councilmember Carlo Leone. I don't want to miss anyone. Do we have any other elected officials present? Okay, guess not. Well, on behalf of the United Peoria Foundation, I would like to thank Mr. Fox and other participating for devoting their time this morning to discussing economic opportunities which Arizona and Mexico share. Arizona has 360 miles of common border with our sister state, Sonora. Together, we occupy a geostrategic position which gives us access to potential major seaport and highway and rail systems which reach down into southern Mexico and beyond Central and South America, up to Canada and across the United States from California to the East Coast. Through the North American Free Trade Agreement, we have created new and large markets for products made in both of our countries. And in the process, we have developed new jobs and higher standard of living both north and south of the border. For Arizona, this relationship has made Mexico our #1 export market, accounting for over 34% of all Arizona exports, and involving over 8,000 Arizona businesses and countless employees. Tourism, construction, computers, and mining equipment all have prospered by our relationship with Mexico. Now, as Mexico is pushing towards with new economic reforms in the oil industry, tax structure, and education, we in Arizona need to lend support for visions to our neighbors in the South. We need to seize the new opportunities which are emerging for both countries. Now is not the time to focus on the past. It is time to initiate new openings, such as a new and strong commercial and cultural mission stationed permanently in Mexico City and perhaps elsewhere in Mexico. It is time to begin new educational programs which encompass internships, binational education programs in our state universities. Partnered together, we can raise the standard of living for our people, create new jobs on both sides of the border, and foster new ideas and understandings which makes us a cultural and intellectual richer people. Let us not be afraid of the future and new ideas, but instead seize the opportunities of the moment in time and move together boldly towards the future. Lastly, last year, when I introduced President Fox, I suggested that comprehensive immigration reform was needed to encourage better economic relations between our two countries. Since that time, we have made great progress in the effort for meaningful immigration reform. President Fox knows well of the great economic opportunity that exists between Mexico and the U.S. and how we will be enhanced by an immigration bill. And before I end, I don't think they receive enough credit, but I want to give the thanks and praise to both of our U.S. senators, Senator McCain and Senator Flake, for taking the lead on this fight. We now have to convince our friends in the U.S. House of Representatives. I can only hope that the President's visits here today demonstrates to our members of Congress that we desperately need positive action on this critical issue. And now we have a set of guest speakers who will be sharing with us, and I would like to introduce Senator Bob Worsley. Senator Bob Worsley was elected last year to represent Mesa's Legislative District 25. He won his GOP primary race against the former Senate President and author of SB 1070. Bob is committed to genuine immigration reform and is a leader in this issue. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to introduce Senator Bob Worsley.
Thank you very much, Tony. He's become, in the last year, a very dear friend of mine, and I have great hopes, as I know President Fox does, for Tony's future politically here in Arizona. When I ran last year, it's only been 18 months. 18 months ago, I would have never believed that I would have been running for any office. I was asked to run in Mesa to avoid re-election of our previous Senate president, who was pushing SB 1070. Now that I look back on it, I have some observations I want to share with you. My campaign was based on elevating Arizona, that we could look to rise above the petty infighting and become committed to a shared vision for our state in 8 ways. So we played off of elevate Arizona in 8 ways. The first way was to elevate enthusiasm. We need a positive image for my city, Mesa, where the Senate president came from, and from Arizona. New leadership was to restore our state's image in the nation again. We need to be proud of our leaders. In that regard, let me share 3 or 4 things I've done this year in this first way of elevating enthusiasm. I founded a new entity called Arizona Voices. On July 4th, we launched this. We'll be talking more about it before the next session starts. We're asking all Arizona citizens to participate in a digital town hall on how to improve the future of our state. This has never been done before at a state level through a social media platform like this. We now have our equivalent of Envision Utah, which was started in 1997, and COTBD, Colorado to be determined, in Colorado, and Texas 1 in Texas. States that are working hard to come up with a vision for their state that is elevated and worth our time and effort as politicians. I also feel strongly that I was able to block some dumb bills this year in the Senate and stayed above the fray, tried to stay out of the news in terms of doing things with poor judgment, and I'm trying to promote ideas that will unite the GOP. We all look with great interest at the Arab Spring. All of the countries from Afghanistan, Iraq, Egypt, Syria, Libya, and we wonder, how could these Arab folks of the same religion be fighting and killing each other from the Shia and Sunni factions of the same religion? Well, folks, we're doing it here in the United States, and the GOP is doing a pretty good job in its own party. Our party is deeply fractured, and the infighting is brutal. I've experienced it in the last 10 months. It's time for us to elevate above this petty infighting and unite ourselves behind conservative principles that we share with most of our Latin brothers and sisters. The Arizona Senate is a microcosm of a greater national crisis. We have to come together and find a common vision that we can rally toward and stop fighting on the fringes with each other. Another thing that I've worked on very hard is my wife and I have announced Consolari. It is a Lincoln Center of the West. We're partnering with Juilliard and Lincoln Center to build a campus like they did in New York City in 1961 and making it very accessible to all people, all the performing arts on one campus. We've named it Consolari because that's a Latin verb that means to console or to heal and give solace. We think it's time to heal our party, it's time to heal our state, and we believe that the racial tensions with the Latino community can be mended through music, sharing Latin American music in our city, in this campus, this performing arts campus, and that's exactly why I ran for Senate last year. The second thing that I promised to do in my campaign was to elevate excellency. We need leaders that maintain a personal example that we can be proud of. Also, that they're not there for personal financial gain. I've donated 100% of my salary. I've not signed up for a state pension. And I've spent over $1 million of my own personal wealth this last year running for office and starting to build the foundation for this Consolari project, something that will make us proud to live in this state, an elevated place where we can share a beautiful state and a beautiful community together. Number 3, we need to elevate expectations of our elected leaders. We need to slow down the bill mill, trying to pass a lot of new laws. We need to first seek to understand before we run out and try to be understood. I'm meeting with all sides of all issues, Democrats, independents, and Republicans, making myself available to hear all sides of the issues. I remember what Stan Turley said when he was coaching me. Always ask the question, is it moral? And move up the political ladder. We need to stop that and do what's right for our state. The next thing I promised to do was to elevate Arizona's economy. Our number one priority in this state should be to make sure that we increase jobs and facilitate the recovery of home values and tourism. We took a real hit with the reputation here in Arizona. A lot of people decided not to bring their conventions here. It's time to elevate that and bring these businesses back and create jobs. What I've done this year to elevate job creation is that I introduced Senate Bill 1389, which requires that the legislature look at the impact on private sector before they pass new bills. The bill didn't go anywhere. I'm going to introduce it again this year. I'm pushing for new job creation opportunities. I'm behind the resurrection of the Pinell County Red Rock Rail Classification Yard with Union Pacific, a press release that went out 2 months ago, which will create hundreds of jobs and create real prosperity in Pinell County. I also started a business called Novo Power in Snowflake, where we've restarted an idled facility and brought laid-off workers in the most depressed area of the state back to work. Today we're making 25 megawatts of power using biomass, and we have over 100 people back to work that were idled since last March. It's important that we focus on our economy, and I think what Tony is doing here today is making sure we focus on those things. We need to elevate education. I have a number of things we've done on education. I'll save that for another time. Elevating efficiency and thrift. We passed TPT reform this year. I'm very proud of that. We passed a solid budget. We're promoting online voting that will save us tens of millions of dollars. And last but not least, we've been working very hard behind the scenes to support Senator McCain and Senator Flake's SB 744, a compromise, but a great start. And if the House wants to change and tweak some things, we're supporting that. But let's get a bill passed, put it into conference, and get it on the President's desk to sign. Nothing can be more important, I think, for our state than to see immigration reform passed this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Worsley. Now I would like to introduce from the Tucson area, Representative Macario Saldate.
Muy buenos días, good morning. Before coming to the legislature, I spent 38 years at the University of Arizona. One of my roles there was as the initial director of the Mexican American Studies and Research Center, where we studied the population of Mexican Americans, obviously in the U.S., but also as part of that, towards the end of my stay at the university, I was the director of the Guadalajara Summer School Program for 20 years. And that experience taught me something, and that is that education plays a vital role, whether it be business, whether it be economics, whether it be language or culture, etc. But the important thing is to go to Mexico not just to learn Spanish or the culture, etc., and for higher education to put that aside for someone else to do as a summer experience, but rather we could actually integrate the faculty members, outstanding faculty people at our universities with the university members in Mexico, in Guadalajara, in Mexico City. That has been, to me, a source of great, great benefit to our program, where we have an interdisciplinary program. People go to learn a language, but there has to be a reason for learning the language. And that is primarily found if it's oriented to a particular discipline. And I found outstanding results out of seeing this happen. We all know that there's a lot of importance in terms of a shared border, all the issues that come up. But I think establishing institutions that integrate themselves both south, and the people in South here in developing our new leaders is of paramount importance. I have seen miracles take place when individuals from here go to learn Spanish and they live with a Mexican family. What they pick up and the relationships that they establish and the businesses develop and the long-lasting relationships of all types that develop from that experience is unique. It's really outstanding. We need to do more of that, and education, higher education, needs to lead the way. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Representative Saldate. Now, I would like to introduce Andrew Pacheco. Mr. Pacheco is now currently the Criminal Division Chief of the Arizona Attorney General's Office, where he oversees all aspects of the Attorney General's criminal investigations and prosecutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Vice Mayor Rivero, for putting this this group together and for allowing me to be a part of it. It's an honor to be on the same panel as this august group. I don't have lengthy comments, but I think it would be remiss. I would be remiss if I didn't mention how important it is from a law enforcement perspective for prosecutors and law enforcement in the United States to have excellent and seamless working relationships with law enforcement in Mexico. As many of you know, the Republic of Mexico is undergoing a change in their judicial system to a system that is much more similar to the system that is used in the United States. And the Attorney General's office in Arizona, under Tom Horn's leadership, is attempting to play an important role in training Mexican prosecutors and law enforcement so that they can develop new skills. And let's not remember that to be a prosecutor in the United States is certainly an honor and a calling, but to be a prosecutor or in law enforcement in the country of Mexico is not only a calling, but it is there's a situation in Mexico where when one serves their country, they oftentimes are putting their lives on the line. It's not uncommon for prosecutors and law enforcement in the country of Mexico to face very grave threats to themselves and to their families. We hear over and over again when one police chief has been murdered, within hours of a replacement being named, the next police chief has been killed. So from a law enforcement perspective, there are few things more important that we can do than to assist our great neighbor south of the border, Mexico, and to recognize that if it weren't for some of the problems that we have in the United States, Mexico wouldn't be paying such a dear price, and their public servants wouldn't be paying such a dear price. But so that was my first point. My second point is that I'd really like to shine a light today on the very important work that Mrs. McCain is doing. It's an honor to serve with her on the governor's task force against human trafficking. We had the opportunity yesterday to meet with representatives, from the chief counsel of Backpage. As you may or may not know, Backpage is an online classified ads service, and they are also believed to be, I think, convincingly believed to be the largest location for the purchase and sale of young girls into human trafficking. And so they can play a very important role in not only being a part of the problem, but also being a part of the solution. Unfortunately, in our discussion with them yesterday, it became readily apparent that the excuses that they provide when they are questioned about the content of their ads really focus on that they're policing themselves. They claim to have 110 persons who are hired for the sole purposes of screening advertisements to make sure that no young girls are being advertised for prostitution. But when we went through with specificity with them, line by line, one particular ad, it became very clear that really what they're doing is they're giving the ad poster every benefit of the doubt. And so I think it's important that we call upon Backpage to instead give human trafficking victims the benefit of the doubt and not their own bottom line. So with that, you have many more important speakers to hear from. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. Our next speaker is Hugh Holman, the immediate past mayor of the city of Tempe, a position that relied upon his background as a public servant, economist, and attorney to shape public policies that work for people in his community. Mr. Mayor.
I would like to join the others in first thanking Vice Mayor Rivero for putting not only this morning's event together, but all of the events throughout the day that help highlight the important relationship between the United States and Mexico, and in particular Arizona and Sonora. This press conference really is about the topic of economic leadership. It's a topic that I've written about for more than 20 years. For those of you who enjoy Cómo hacer negocios en Arizona, I commend it to your attention. It's still available on the internet, although it's now only $4 apparently on Amazon used, and how to do business in Sonora. This was done with the intention of developing our economic relationship between Mexico and the United States and Arizona and Sonora. But sadly, our efforts to work to generate a more positive economic relationship between our two important countries has been overshadowed for many, many years, in particular the last 8 years, by a horrible battle from the left and the right over immigration reform. We have name-calling going on that has one side shouting that others are open border amnesty fanatics, and the other side talking about xenophobic bigots. That's not particularly helpful, because most of us are caught in the middle of that polarizing rhetoric in hopes that we can actually achieve better results. We need effective, practical solutions, because if we do not achieve such solutions, the current stalemate actually only serves to promote the evil that is going on between our two nations. It's evil that has too long been ignored. Our positive legal trade is actually held hostage by this illegal activity. It's activity that is likeliest, most known to us through drug trade. But thanks to Mrs. McCain and Mrs. Fox, we are getting greater recognition of the fact that we have enormous trade in human beings. Many people in the current debate talk about the rule of law as being their touchstone for determining what people ought to be doing, that everyone must abide by the law. I happen to agree with that from the most noble blue-collar worker to the lowest president of the United States who violates the law, each one of us should be held to account. But that view of the rule of law is only one half of the coin, because the premise of the rule of law is that every single one of us matters. That's why we all must abide by the law, but we all should recognize that every human being has dignity and matters. We need to care as much about the lives that are being destroyed by drugs and the sex trade. These illegal trades affect all of us. Likely there is not a person within the sound of my voice who has not been touched by illegal drugs. That's certainly been true of my own family. Unfortunately, too many of us are ashamed of the fact that that is occurring in our society. Mrs. Fox noted that this morning, and I think it's an important element to focus on. The shame and humiliation experienced by families when children, when parents, grandparents, and others are drawn into the use of illegal drugs. It destroys families, and the shame prevents us from addressing these challenges. Again, it's happened in my own family. We've been deeply touched by illegal drugs and the addiction to them. So those who feel alone and isolated in these kinds of instances need to understand that as you look out and fear the concerns of your own family and see all these other perfect families around you, I'm here to tell you there is no such thing as a perfect family. If you think they exist, you just don't know them well enough. Illegal sex trade, however, also touches more of us than you might know. My own niece was kidnapped into the sex trade when she was 15 years old, drugged and shipped to Florida, where she served as a prostitute. She lost her life before she turned 19. It touches families in Arizona deeply, families across the United States, families in Mexico. We have got to address these challenges openly and honestly. That's why I'm standing here before you today. And I specifically want to thank two great women who are bringing to the attention of Arizona and the United States this challenge, Mrs. Fox and Mrs. McCain, for their direct intervention into these challenges. We need to rip away the shame that families experience and that young women have experienced, and young men, as Mrs. McCain frequently notes. We have a Super Bowl coming up soon, and it is because of Mrs. McCain's leadership that attention is being drawn to the fact that the Super Bowl tends to be one of the most ardent drivers of human trafficking. So ladies, thank you very much for your brave leadership and taking on challenges that most would prefer not to be brought up. But it is, as President Fox has noted in the past, as an able speaker on this subject, that it is the appetites in the United States that we must address. It is those appetites that are drawing sex trade and illegal drugs to the United States. And frankly, it is our personal responsibility to face it, because that personal responsibility we bear is causing us to have to bear the burden of the fact that it is the United States and its appetites that is destroying Mexico. Mexico is being held hostage by drug traders and human traffickers. Human beings in Mexico are having guns held to their heads to engage in these activities. And it's not because Mexican citizens seek to do so. It's because drug traffickers are using Mexico as the door to the United States. That is on our heads and our responsibility. So it is important that we address immigration reform to get practical solutions for appropriate positive economic activity between the United States and our most important trading partner, Mexico. But we also have to address the negative side of the trade that's going on between our countries. And again, thank you to Mrs. Fox and Mrs. McCain, and specifically to President Fox for his continuing leadership in Mexico and across the globe to address these very challenging issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Hellman. Our next speaker is going to be sharing the stage with President Fox tonight at our special dinner, Rosario Marin. Rosario Marin served for 22 years at the local, state, and national levels. In addition, her professional career includes banking, nonprofit organizations, and the corporate world. She is a businesswoman, an author, and international recognized speaker. In 2001, she was appointed by President George W. Bush and unanimously confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Mrs. Marin served as the 41st Treasurer of the United States, becoming the first immigrant to serve in that position. She championed the U.S. Treasury's financial literacy outreach programs, focusing especially on the 10 million unbanked Americans. Now it's a privilege and honor to introduce the former Treasurer of the United States, Rosario Marin.
Yes, I used to be a secretary when I started working for a bank. No. But I was actually, Tony, yes, you're right. I was Secretary of State and Consumer Services for under the Governor Schwarzenegger after I was Treasurer of the United States. So with all these different titles, you know, it's former mayor, former treasurer, former secretary, but I will always be a mother, and I think that's the most important one. Tony, thank you so very much for having me here. Thank you all to the speakers. Wonderful to be with all of you. Señor Presidente, qué gusto verlo otra vez. Marta, what a wonderful to see you again. And Ms. McCain, it's also wonderful. I worked very hard on John McCain's campaign for president. Anyways, I was asked to talk a little bit about the relationship, the economic relationship between Mexico and the United States and the growing opportunities there are for both businesses, excuse me, to create opportunities for people working here in Mexico. I am reminded of the wonderful efforts that we had when I was the treasurer and President Fox was the president of Mexico. We established, the two countries established Partnership for Prosperity. You remember that, Mr. President? And that was the whole thing. It was the realization that what's good for the United States is good for Mexico and vice versa. And a vibrant economy in the United States bodes well for Mexico and vice versa. And it was that understanding that deeply held belief that there are communities. Yes, there are Mexican communities here in the United States. But interestingly enough, and we don't talk about that often, there are entire American communities in Mexico. And so it is that understanding that blood runs through both of our veins, throughout Mexico and the United States. And the Mexicans need products and services from America, and America needs products and services from Mexico. And what better opportunity to highlight and enhance the economic relationships than by establishing a very good and working and solid rapport between the two countries. We did a lot of work. I personally, when I was a treasurer, I was very involved, as Tony said, on the remittances, on the issue of banking, of the unbanked, people that were in the United States that didn't have a bank account and were therefore being charged exorbitant amount of monies to make those transfers, what's called remesas, to Mexico. We worked hard to open competition, and we did. And the amount of the cost of the remittance was lowered tremendously. Today, you can transfer money almost without paying anything. There are opportunities. You know, yes, we have many challenges, and it is my hope, and we worked very hard on immigration reform back then, and we're still working on that. I sincerely hope that we're able to see immigration reform. And we need it because our legal immigration system is broken. Just very simply put. If it was working, we wouldn't have 11 or 12 million people here undocumented. So we need to understand that. Everybody needs to understand that. The system as it is today is not working. It has failed us as Americans, and it has failed people that want to come here legally. You see, if our legal immigration system was working, we wouldn't have it. And every day we delay the reform, the problem only gets bigger. And so I hope, I have to give a lot of kudos to Senator McCain for his leadership way back then. And just most recently, I have to give kudos to Senator Rubio. Quite frankly, if we're only talking about immigration reform today, because Senator Rubio also took a tremendous stand on that. And so it is my hope it will open. There are many economic reasons why we need immigration reform. Now, we have a lot of challenges, and I have to give both Cindy McCain and Marta Sagun, the Fox, tremendous kudos for their effort in this very, very difficult problem of human trafficking. When we forget about the dignity of one human being, we forget about the dignity of all of us as human beings. So for your efforts, thank you so very, very much on what you're doing. I am always reminded of Oliver Wendell Holmes. He was a Supreme Court Justice of the United States back in the 1930s. And I have actually taken his words and made them mine. But he used to say that what lies ahead of us and what lies behind us is small compared to what lies within us. We have faced a lot of challenges before them, and obviously, they're behind us. And we are bigger than what lies ahead of us. I know that together we can work to overcome whatever challenge we have, because we as a nation are bigger than the challenges before us. I am convinced of that. And so, yes, it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of work. I understand that. But we're bigger than that, because all of us yearn for a better world. We yearn for a better Arizona and for a better America and for a better Mexico. All of us ought to demand better action by our elected officials, because we deserve a better world. And I thank all of you for being here. And whether you're working on economics, human trafficking, self-esteem, education, housing, whatever the challenge, whatever the problems is, I just want to remind you, we are bigger than those challenges. So thank you so very much, and thank you for having me. We'll be with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Marin. Now I would like to introduce our next distinguished speaker, Cindy Hensley McCain. Mrs. McCain has dedicated her life to improving the lives of those less fortunate, both in the United States and around the world. Cindy is known for lending her time and talent to increase awareness of international charity organizations and the work they do to make this a better place. Her formal education includes an undergraduate degree in education and a master's in special education. Cindy resides in Phoenix with her husband, U.S. Senator John McCain. Together, they have 4 children, Megan, Jack, Jimmy, and Bridget. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Cindy McCain.
You've heard enough from me today, but the one word I'd like to leave you with is the importance of what Mrs. Fox and I did speak about today. This is an issue that has not been talked about in a great deal of way in Arizona or nationally, but let me tell you, Arizona is going to be a leader in this issue. We are going to stop human trafficking, at least in this state, along with the other states who have just recently passed legislation, New Jersey, Connecticut, Indiana. Texas is very good on this issue. It has been said many times today, one human life has the dignity of every human life. I can tell you that with regards to what we intend to do, we respect and give dignity to all human lives, and we intend to stop the misuse of young girls and young boys in this state. I rely on not only the people up here, but I rely on all of you in the media today, because you can carry the message for us. It is important that we educate the folks in Arizona and the folks nationally that we mean business here. We would like to have a Super Bowl that is fun for everybody, and make sure that our traffickers know that this is a flyover state. We don't intend to put up with you. We're going to jail you for a long time if you try it here. I want to thank you for being here today, and more importantly, I want to thank Mrs. Fox for her participation in this forum today, and her efforts on this issue and many other human rights issues that face both of our countries. President Fox, we have known you a long time. Thank you for your continued leadership. Thank you for your friendship. And more importantly, thank you for working on very difficult issues with us. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mrs. McCain. Lastly, I would like to introduce someone I consider a friend, the former president of Mexico. Vicente Fox was born in Mexico City, the second of 9 children, fruit of the marriage between Jose Luis Fox, a farm trader, and Doña Mercedes Quesada. In 1964, he joined the firm Coca-Cola de Mexico as a route supervisor. From aboard his delivery truck, he had the opportunity to get to know virtually every nook and cranny of the country. His performance in his work allowed him to rise through the ranks until he eventually became regional CEO of the company for Mexico and Latin America, the youngest person to hold such a position in the firm. In 1991, he ran for governor of the state of Guanajuato. In 1995, he ran again, this time in a special election for governor, which he won by a significant majority. On July 2nd of 2000, Vicente Fox was victorious in the presidential election, and at the same day declared his commitment to form a government that is plural, honest, and capable. A government that includes the very best for the country's citizens. His election marked the end of a period of over 70 years, during which every single president of Mexico had been a militant of the country's institutional revolutionary party, the PRI. As such, he was the first president in the country's transition to democracy to come from the ranks of the opposition. Today, he lives on the ranch his grandfather purchased a century ago. The 200-year-old hacienda of San Cristobal is now home to a study center, library, and museum, all of which bear his name, Central Fox. Central Fox is, as it is better known, is a forum of thoughts and ideas, and also home to the foundation Vamos Mexico. Today, Vicente Fox continues to ride his horse like Don Quixote in search of new goals, for it is his abiding belief that whoever ceases to grow will begin to die. Now it is a privilege and honor to introduce to you the former President of Mexico, Vicente Fox.
Gracias. Muchísimas gracias, muchísimas gracias. Thanks. Thank you very much. And congratulations for this gift you gave us this morning, Cindy, Martha. And I hope we will do so tonight, Rosario. And gifts, that's something that we all have. We were created together with a lot of gifts that we carry within, that we have in our person. Gifts that are there to share. Gifts that we can all give to others. Gifts that will bring happiness to our heart. And that's what we're receiving today on this constant all-day dialogue that Tony prepared for us and that we are enjoying every minute and every second. Pretty difficult to put together all the issues that we have dealt with in just a couple of hours. Maybe mind mapping this new technology and strategy of putting together in one piece of paper a drawing that shows us how things can be linked and connected. And at the very end, find the core or the problems and the amount of the opportunities that we have. This long, long relationship with Mexico and United States has gone through very difficult times, has gone through very productive and positive accomplishments. And today, I think that we have to stop on the road and see where we're doing well, what is moving too slow, and what has obstacles. When I see the border, and I see the trading of $750 billion US dollars trading in a year's time between Mexico and United States, it's incredible the efficiency, the technology, the improvement, the dynamics on which is being done. That trade balance is the largest worldwide. We buy from this nation over $350 billion US dollars, which means hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of jobs to these nations, to American citizens. And we sell to this nation $350 billion US dollars worth of products, services that come from Mexico, that mean millions of jobs, quality jobs that have been built in Mexico through this virtuous trading capacity that we have developed. But even that being one of the most positive accomplishments in our relationship can go way beyond. There is no limit of what we can do further and beyond NAFTA. NAFTA needs to be reshaped. NAFTA needs to be brought back to the dynamic that it had at the very beginning. In a way, it seems to be a mature project that is not moving with the dynamism that it moved at the beginning. It's time to come back to reinvent, to reshape our partnership agreement. The threat is on the east. The region where we're losing jobs with is the east. It's China, it's India, it's those fast-growing economies. It's them that being so competitive are taking away jobs from Mexican economy, from US, Canadian economy. So the threat is there, and what we need is to understand, review the facts under which the basic foundations on which we had the vision to put NAFTA together. And if we review that, we will see a whole lot of new opportunities to keep on that process, bringing quality of life to our communities. But when I see that border and I then move from products and services to people, that 1 million people that crosses that border every day, I don't see the same efficiency, the same quality, the same results. And that's where we find a lot of problems that if we have the capacity to remove, then we're going to be having much better future in our partnership. Problems like the one dealt with Cindy and Martha this morning. It's not only sex, women, girls, trafficking, but it's also trafficking labor, trafficking those that have and share with this nation the America's dream. America's dream. It's not the dream only of this nation and its wonderful people. It's the dream of all the Americas. It's the dream that Martha and I lived yesterday in Guatemala with 10 former presidents, with the actual president, and with a community of 2,000 leaders of Guatemala discussing how that future can be brighter, how we can build that better world as we have discussed this morning. And so the word is spreading out. The meetings are going everywhere. The search for solutions, the search for actions is on the move everywhere, fortunately. So we must be very optimistic about this future in all of our continent. So we have to work on those key crucial issues. And here one very strategic part of solution has to do with migration. Migration is a key strategic positive asset to all nations. It nourishes the capacity and the energy and the dynamism of a nation. What better example than this nation, built by migrants all along. Everybody sitting in this room, sooner or later looking backwards, has a migrant origin, either in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. So this nation has to have the wisdom, the vision to deal with this strategic issue as an example to the rest of the world. Because migration flows are everywhere, very intense and intensifying more and more. On one side, those that move looking for better opportunities, or those who move out where problems are very tough, or just move to learn, to share, and to meet with other people in different regions of the world. I sometimes don't understand why, being so positive, we had taken the decision to build a wall. I mean, in globalization, when the globe is a small village, we build walls like the Chinese built their wall against their enemies, the Mongols. And they learned that walls don't work. And then Berlin, they built a wall against freedom, trying to retain people within and not letting them out. And that wall didn't work against freedom. So we must be building bridges. And this is what we're doing today, the whole of the day, building bridges. How we can do better. How we can manage this tough issue. 10 years ago, John was in Mexico, together with Ted Kennedy, a Democrat and a Republican, meeting with a rancher that became president in Mexico. And the three of us working with a commitment that a migration reform would come out that year. And a few months in advance, President Bush was, for the first time, first in Mexico, then in Canada, when he inaugurated his administration. A day and a half we invested in building a sound migration reform. Everything was excitement, but the obstacles came, September the 11th. That very sad day that should never ever repeat again. But being a sad day, we don't have to live with that image and that situation the rest of our lives. And we would not have to sacrifice the future just thinking on fear. Because in a way, it's what September the 11th brought to this nation, fear. And maybe that's why the wall was built. And maybe that's why we have delayed solving the problem of migration, thinking that migrants could be part of the threat that came from that day. So, strategy. Leaders commit. The real sophisticated part of a leader, it's not just discussing things. It's not just planning. It's not just holding dialogues. It's making things happen. And the time has come that we have to make things happen. As Cindy in this great state is working in advance the Super Bowl, and you decided to take that flag so that you have a D-Day, where you have to have things solved. And what we don't have in migration is a D-Day, Dia D, which solved the problem of Europe of the Second World War. D-Day. It's key that we put a limit to our discussions, to our planning, to our dialogues, to our meetings, and we take action. And I think that D-Day is now here. We have to renew, reshape NAFTA. We have to renew, reshape our migration policies, public policies. We have to reinvent our neighboring and our friendship between the United States and Mexico. And so that will happen. Today, the time has shortened so much, time being the key element in progress. Be on time, have the right timing is crucial. And we need to attend that. And today, technology has brought to all of us the capacity to move on time, online, with the illimited knowledge that we have access to, each one of us. Illimited knowledge. We are in a new renaissance. Renaissance, first Greece, with Academus, with Socrates, with Plato, and all the rest of those brilliant minds that started provoking a universal movement of thought, of intelligence, of culture, of arts, and of well-doing. Saludos, griego. Here is one Greek. He's going to Greek next week. And the second Renaissance, the Medici family, the Da Vinci's, and all those also which did and discovered so many great things for humankind. Now the time has come. We're on the third Renaissance. And what would Socrates, Plato, the Medicis, or Leonardo have given if they would have had the knowledge that each one of us has here, and each one of the 6 or 7 billion, or I don't know how many people we are in this world? But the access to knowledge, to experience, to online, to speed, to solve problems and bring solutions is accessible to all of us. So my call here is let's move, like Cindy said. We cannot wait anymore. Let's put a due date. Let's have a D-Day and accomplish. On one side, let's remove the obstacles. On the other side, let's take the opportunities and make them come true. I'm looking forward, enjoying the rest of the day, because Academus invited Socrates, Plato, and all the rest to his home just to sit down and talk, just to deliver, just to dialogue, just to make the ideas come to this world. And this is a day of academy here in Peoria, in Phoenix, and in Arizona. Let's commit to that. Let's develop our academia every year, every day, every month, every minute. Let's go within ourselves. Let's gift ourselves with 5 minutes of good thoughts, of good meditation, of good evaluation. What's wrong? What's not working? What's moving too slow? And let's accelerate, because the East is accelerating, and we need to move fast. Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have time for a couple of questions, so I'll open it up. Go ahead.
Señor Presidente, ¿usted piensa todavía que la legalización de la marihuana ayudaría a resolver sus problemas entre México y Estados Unidos? If you can answer in English or Spanish, whatever you want.
Sí. Of course, I think that I now moved ahead from the discussion, the planning, the analyzing, the studying, the evaluating, and I'm a total activist. Few key reasons. One, the sadness I feel in my heart for what is going on in Mexico. A war that we don't deserve, blood that should not be happening in Mexico. This case of Mexico being in between the largest consumer, the prohibitionist of the world, which is United States, but at the same time, the by far largest consumer, and the producers in the South. Number two, ethical reasons. I think that we were created free, that governments in the states don't have the capacity or the decision of coming to our minds and controlling our behavior. I think things work much better when we use convincement, when you take free decisions. And I use a comparison that maybe I shouldn't use, but Garden of Eden, forbidden apple, prohibited apple was so attractive, the prohibition, that Adam and Eve went for it. If the message would have been, this apple has worms, it's not good for your health, don't eat it, I'm sure they wouldn't have eaten it. And this is what we have to do with our kids at home, in school, to inform them of the harm that does to your health, drug consumption. And we should educate them also on alcohol and cigarettes, much worse than marijuana. They kill much more people, alcohol and cigarettes, than marijuana itself. Reason number 3, convenience. Wouldn't it be much better to see those 50 billion or 100 billion US dollars that are today in hands of the cartels, in the hands of the criminals, used to kill, used to bribe, to have that money in the hands of government, in hands of a business community? Because at the very end, we have to rely and be confident and trust our people, trust our kids. Kids will not go crazy or crazier because it's legal. They have the same access today by being illegal. And it would be much better to legalize. And finally, a question I have: why this nation, which is the one remaining prohibitionist, the one who criminalizes, penalizes, takes to jail consumers of drugs, which is not everywhere else in the world. Most of us nations, including Mexico, do not penalize consumption. It's not a crime to consume drugs in Mexico. You don't go to jail for consuming drugs. You go to jail for producing, distributing, or selling. But here, this nation is the one remaining with total prohibition. And the case is that is the most single highest consumer in the world, per capita or volume-wise. How come? Where are the authorities? Where the DEA or the CIA or everybody else? Why drugs circulate on a forbidden use of drugs nation? Why they are everywhere? I think that the day is getting close where a Mexican president will say, okay, guys, you take the responsibility. You hold the drug in the border. If you don't want the drug available in the United States, hold it in the border. Why Mexico has to do the job at such a high cost? We lost 80,000 lives. Kids, 15, 25-year-olds that were not born criminals, that did not have criminality in their genes. They just lacked opportunities. I'm sure if they would have found a job, if they would have been given a scholarship to be in university, they would not be in the ranks of the cartels. They are there because they didn't find any other alternative at their reach. And this is what should speed up our thinking. Let's bring solutions. Let's move out of the paradigm of prohibition into a paradigm of regulation, much more effective, like we're doing with cigarettes. Information, education, prevention. And that will work better. Portugal did it, 25% reduction on consumption in 12 years for all drugs. Holland did it for all drugs. It has not increased consumption. Uruguay just took the decision. Seattle, state of Washington, state of Colorado, 20 states that have approved now for medical use, which is working pretty well. Doctors need that drug to provide to their patients. Patients need those drugs to reduce pain and to have a more dignified process in their terminal part of their lives. And so we just have to come with a vision of the paradigm on a place where drugs are legal. And believe me, nothing special is going to happen, except that we will take away from crime $50 billion US, except that we will have separated violence from health issues and deal with those health issues on a different way. So these are some of the ideas on this forum in Guatemala. The 10 former presidents, the actual President Otto, is also totally in agreement now. There is a movement worldwide to rethink about prohibitions, because we're meeting here the last frontier of prohibitions. What else is prohibited except drugs? Now abortion, now marriage between persons of the same sex, now many other things are not prohibited. We're relying and trusting people, the human being, that he will act with responsibility. And I finish this with saying, Mariscal Sucre, the guy who fought by the side of Bolivar, the two guys that fought at the same time for independence and freedom, like Washington, Jefferson, Lafayette, and all those heroes of this nation, we are now moving to that new paradigm most everywhere. Gracias.
Thank you, President Fox, and with that, our press conference concludes.